I'm having a lot of fun seeing the names that are popping up as the attendees, names that I recognize, names that I didn't expect to see, and fill me with a little bit of apprehension because they know a lot of what I'd be talking about, so they can correct us as well. Yeah. But it's good. It's great. Fun, Kevin. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's great to see everyone take an interest in this area of law, particularly because Kevin and I are very passionate about it, and we are very excited to chat about this today. So I see that the numbers have stabilized a little bit. Cool. So morning, everyone, and welcome to the Video Game Law for Noobs webinar. My name is JC, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Kevin and Jamal. We're going to be chatting about just a little bit about the practice area here at Michalsons, and at a later stage, two of our other colleagues are going to be joining us to chat about very select issues in video game law. And yeah, we hope it's going to be both a fun and interactive one. Please ask a lot of questions because we're very keen to hear from everyone. And yeah, so the two colleagues that are going to be joining us is Jason and Bronwyn. Jason's going to be looking at selected data protection issues within video game law, and Bronwyn is going to be looking at the social media aspect of it all. At the moment, we have about 2 polls that I'm going to be launching now, just to get a good idea on, who is with us today, and kind of get a feel on, what the size of your organization. So the first one is that I want to launch is who is with us here today. And you'll see that the polls are very driven towards video game specific or roles that we've identified as very important within the video game industry. And it's going to be very exciting to see, what the spread of these things, what the spread of the crowd is today. Cool. I'll just give that a couple of minutes for everyone to answer. Yeah, so Jamal just posted in the chat that if you have any questions, please just post in the chat and we'll get to it at a later stage. We've allocated about 15 minutes of question and answers close to the end. Cool. So we got our first comment on from the chat. We've got an esports tournament organizer. That is very exciting, and I hope you guys have some exciting tournaments coming up. I see we've got Mr. John Giles here, a lawyer from Michalsons. Ooh, I wonder what Michalsons is. Never heard of the place before. Cool. So I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm just going to display some of the results. So we've got a couple of esports players, we've got streamers and content creators, and a whole lot of others in the chat, like I've mentioned. Cool.
So yeah, if you could actually let us know what kind of a role that you do play in the chat, that would be really, really useful as well.
Because then we'll also be able to contextualize the conversation as much as possible. Cool. So the next question that I have, and this is particularly more geared towards, the organizations. Sorry, I think my video may have frozen. It's going to stop and start again. Cool, back. So the next questionnaire that we have is really just around, the size of the company that you're from. I'm just going to launch it quickly. And, we've kept it to very small numbers because the video game industry, particularly in South Africa, it generates a lot of income, but it's still quite small. And it's something that I saw when I attended Africa Games Week, that there's a lot of that. There actually are, a lot of us here, but that are particularly interested in video games, but it's not yet on the same levels that you would have in your United States or your Europe. But it seems that the skill and the interest is there. Cool. So we're halfway with the question on how big you are, but I see no one else answered it, so just end the poll quickly. And at the moment, we're currently dealing with, so we've got a few solos, a few small organizations, a few medium-sized organizations, as well as large organizations, which is pretty interesting. It means that we've got a pretty equal spread today. So I think for the moment, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Kevin, who's going to talk about, the video game industry in South Africa in general, and we're going to chat about, the various role players that we've identified, and give you a little bit more insight into some of the select issues relating to video game law, particularly from the IP perspective, from the intellectual property perspective, from a labor perspective, as well as, how these things may impact other types of sectors of video game law, like esports and streaming content. Kevin?
Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Okay, let me take the standard pause to share my screen, and you guys can know when it's showing. Should be showing now, and I've lost sight of everyone else. So it's just me and the presentation. Wonderful. Okay, so the first thing, before we actually get into the meat of this particular map that I've set out for you here, is that I just want to let you know that, to use a little bit of gaming terminology, what we're going to be doing, role-playing gaming terminology specifically, we're going to be sitting in the starting zone at the moment of digital entertainment law. And we're not going to be going too deep. We're not going to be fighting any big monsters right now because we're not there yet, okay? We're very low level in this particular webinar, and we're just going to be touching on the shallow level of detail that we would need across a broad spectrum across video game law and digital entertainment law. We will be dealing with a little bit of detail later today, as Jesse has said, in terms of data protection from our attorney Jason, and social media from our attorney Bowman. But yeah, don't expect us to go into too much specific detail right now. What we are hoping to do is, over the next couple of weeks and months, bringing out that detail as we delve into each one of these particular roles based on your feedback and who you want us to talk about more. The other thing to note is, when we talk about digital entertainment law, we are essentially creating a giant banner surrounding all aspects of entertainment in a digital sphere. And for a large segment of it, we're talking about video game developers and the consumers that actually purchase those products, and the people that are involved in that, like publishers and distributors. But there are more. As Jesse alluded to, there are people like streamers, there are people like esports players. We regard these as being all within the ecosystem of digital entertainment law. They all have a role to play. So it's not just about video games, making them and selling them. It's about how you interact with them, how you as a consumer interact with them, how you as a streamer, who is mainly a consumer as well, interact with them, but something changes there. Things like that. The other thing that I'm wanting to just touch on briefly as sort of a legal 101 kind of thing is that in a gaming context, you will have experienced things like player versus player, player versus environments. When we bring it into a legal context, I'm just using that as an analogy for how you have different legal relationships as your position in a particular industry. Sorry, your particular position within the industry. And where you are relating to another player in that industry, where you're a developer and you're having a relationship with a publisher, that's more player to player, right? Both people are players, and you have to engage with that relationship between the two of them. When we talk about player versus environment, I think about it more from the perspective of the actual jurisdiction that you're in, the government, the country, the overarching legal framework within which you as a player have to survive and exist. When we look at digital entertainment law, it's largely more PvP than PvE. But the interesting thing is that because this entertainment industry is digital, we have a number of different jurisdictions that overlap one another. We might be creating a video game in South Africa. We might be selling that video game in the EU. There might be data that we're harvesting from people in the East or further along in the West. And so you've got a lot of different PvE elements, regulatory elements from a lot of different countries coming into play. So while it looks predominantly PvP, each one of those players has got their own environmental considerations that will dictate how they want to interact with you as another player. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too strained of an analogy. The next thing I want to do is last thing before I get into the map is talking about how we can help. There are a million different questions that you might have, and a million different things that we can do. Some of the few things that I have just thought of that you can keep in the back of your mind as to if this is something that you would like us to assist you with is we can assist with drafting contracts for you. We can assist with negotiating contracts if you have been given one that you don't have the power to draft yourself. We can assist on advising how regulations, the PvE environment actually applies to you, depending on your particular role. And we can also strategize your activities or your business position within the broader map. There are many more out there, but we'll work through that as we build this series of webinars. Okay, that's a lot of preliminary stuff. The environment that we've put out over here. You see how I've grouped them into little sectors. And just to give a very brief overview, what I'll be doing is I'll be telling you how all of these people interact with one another. And then if we still have a little bit of time, I'll be going into some of the choice ones that I'm particularly interested in, and touching on some of the legal aspects that I believe are most interesting about that particular role. Again, we're in the starting zone. We're not going to be touching on absolutely every single thing that affects them. So if there are elements here that are missing, don't worry, I know. It's just the elements that are, in my opinion, either the most interesting, the most complicated, or the most pressing for your particular role in this industry. So to go on a quick overview here. This area over here of developer, publisher, distributor, marketer, that's essentially what I like to refer to as kind of the factory, the group of people that create the games that we're ultimately going to be seeing throughout the industry. The developer will create it. They have to consider their employment relationships, the IP that they're getting in, the IP that they're giving out. They would be interacting with publishers who have the broader obligation of actually taking this work that they believe has value in the marketplace and distributing it and finding people to actually purchase it. So distribution, marketing, those are some of the two biggest aspects of publishing. They might want to connect with broader or more particular sort of focused and streamlined distributors and marketers that only focus on those particular avenues to be able to run the correct kinds of marketing that they would need to be able to hit the market that they want, or to be able to distribute it to the widest reach that they need. So these are the four main players that we see in actually producing and getting that game out there in the world. Ideally, your next step is to get to the consumers. It's a little bit more complicated than that because you always have these regulators sitting on the top of everything. Now, I didn't specify all of the different regulators over here because there are a number of them. For our purposes today, and the most prominent regulators that we have currently in South Africa, the ones that are making the most noise at the moment are the information regulator regarding data protection. They essentially are the arm of the hand of the law with regards to the Protection of Personal Information Act, which Jason will mention a little bit later. And the Film and Publications Board. That is another regulator that we've been hearing about for a number of years, and we're going to be sending out alerts later today or tomorrow regarding the most recent things that they have said, signing the Film and Publications Amendment Bill into law, and how they're considering actually applying that. We're also going to be talking a little bit about that later. But essentially, these are the people that fulfill that PvE role. They say, right, you're wanting to do X. This is how you can do X. This is what you have to, these are the hoops that you have to jump through in order to do X. So the developer, publisher, distributor, marketer, they all have to make sure that they meet the various requirements set out by the various regulators that apply to them. And once they've done that, then ideally, off we go, we're in the marketplace. Consumers are buying your product. The reason that I put a streamer over here next to the consumer is that oftentimes what we'll find is that streamers are consumers. We stream because we're doing we're talking about things we love, things that we consume. We talk about the art that we follow, the games that we play. And more often than not, what you would need to do as a streamer is actually have the thing that you're wanting to stream. Let's say I'm going to be streaming Call of Duty or Fortnite. I have to be a player. I have to be a consumer. So there's a very close relationship between the there are sort of two relationships within the streamer's mind, really. There's the consumer relationship where they're bringing in a product. And then there is a business relationship or a business identity where they're producing something as well. And they need to make sure that there's no disconnect between those two, and that the business identity is actually doing what the consumer identity is allowed to be doing. Because as anyone who knows anything about IP law will tell you, you can only do as much as they let you do, the person who actually holds the IP. Okay, so that is the main arc of creating the game, consuming the game, doing a little bit of fun stuff with the game, maybe a little bit of business stuff with the game. Then underneath this all, we have let's not mince words, where the big money is, really, where people want to make events, make massive partnerships and tournaments and competitions that really use this glorious industry, this glorious hobby that everyone is involved in, and puts it on a public platform. And the roles that we have over here, we have investors. Investors would be pretty much related to any one of these bubbles, actually. Essentially, the shareholder, the person that wants to give you money and see a return on their investment at the end of the day. They could be investing in a developer, they could be investing in a publisher or a distributor, they could be investing in certain events, or streamers if you're a particularly big streamer out there. A subset, a different type of investor would be a sponsor. Normally, sponsors are not necessary. You could regard these as synonyms, but the reason I've separated it out is that in a lot of instances that I've seen, sponsors tend to be more about brand recognition. They give the money to make sure that people see that they're actually there. They don't necessarily want monetary return on investment all the time. There are some that do, but otherwise sometimes not. And you mainly find sponsors. I see that Jesse's raised his hand.
Yeah, Kevin, if I can just jump in here, just to contextualize, the investor-sponsor relationship and to bring it more in line with, some of the things that we've seen in the media. Let's take Microsoft's purchase of Activision, or Sony's purchase of and the name of the company that the board is slipping me at the moment, sorry, Bungie, for example. Those are two very key examples of how we've seen big video game companies, big video game developers and publishers, put all these different studios under one roof in order to galvanize and create better content for people. And we're going to see a lot more of these coming up and I mean, Kevin and I, we've actually chatted about the console war to a large extent when we used to be in the office, and we're both of the opinion that these things are going to keep on happening, and the scale that these things are happening is just going to drastically increase, because there's going to be this rush to start securing more exclusive studios. Then there's going to be more emphasis on titles being made by certain companies that are only going to be made available on certain consoles, and it's really going to have this massive impact on the industry going forward. investors, particularly down in South Africa, we are probably going to see a lot more international investors coming in and investing in our local video game companies to develop content for them, to remaster certain games for them, to port certain games for them. It's really, the video game industry in South Africa has exponentially blown up over these past couple of years, and it's going to continue to blow up within the future.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So I'm just trying to find where I was again. Okay, right. So we were talking about sponsors. Sponsors normally link into events like tournaments, like conferences. I originally had drafted over here esports competitions, but the reality is that we're actually looking at many more things. You could have things like Comic-Con tournaments, any kind of place that you're going to be using some of the IP that comes from this particular industry to pump that event and bring people to your event is something that you would need to consider in this particular group. And obviously, the event is not in itself just a person that is concerned about licensing. There are a lot of different aspects of the event that event planners would need to be aware of. Things like staffing concerns. Who's actually going to be running the event? Do you do it yourself? Do you get an outside organizer involved to actually manage the administration? If it is something like a tournament, is it going to be televised? Is it going to be streamed anyway? What is the broadcast platform that you're going to be using? And do you actually have the license rights to license that content? And honestly, that's one of the biggest areas that money sits in most television, to be honest, not just in esports. Who actually has the power to disseminate that information to the rest of the world and get people watching? And then probably one of my favorite little brackets over here is the people that are actually involved in this particular event. Now, again, depending on what the kind of event, you maybe don't have esports players or teams involved. Not every single event is a tournament. But when you do, you're going to have these players involved. And esports clubs and teams are an interesting entity because they're very similar. A lot of people seem to regard them as being sort of voluntary groups where friends just get together and play and they have a sort of a common understanding of things. But if you look at other forms of sport law, like how the South African Rugby Federation works, how the Cricket Association works, a lot of these players are actually employees of that particular organization. So it's very interesting to us seeing this shift in mindset that is currently happening with esports clubs and players into acknowledging that there is actually a structure that they should be considering when establishing their particular club or or if you're a particular player, and understanding that you as a player have more rights than just sitting playing a game and getting your percentage winnings or things like that. Okay, so that is a brief overview of this map. Like I said in the beginning, we're at the starting zone. We're not dealing with absolutely every single monster. There are probably a million different players at a million different levels within the world that I've sketched out over here. I remember seeing one of the members saying that they were a systems developer. You might not be in and of yourself a game developer. You might be a staff member for any one of these particular roles, but you're still part of the digital entertainment environment, and there are still things within that environment that impact you. So just to touch on a couple of I see that I've essentially got just another 5 minutes to go. So I'm just going to go through some of the most interesting little legal aspects of these particular bubbles. In terms of developers, labor is important, employees, independent contractors. One thing that is interesting for me is the concept of royalties. A lot of people regard it as the only way that you get information in, or that you get someone to develop something for you, be it music, be it artwork or anything like that, is you give me something and I give you money for it. Fantastic. But if you're going to get a composer in, composers exist in a completely different legal sphere where they are used to concepts of royalties. So oftentimes they will be wanting royalties for whenever their game is played, or a version of, you wouldn't really be able to do that because you can play a game a million times, but there would be a version of that that would be tweaked for the video game industry. Perhaps a percentage of sales. Perhaps they have a percentage of the sale of the game and 100% of the sale of the Steam audio catalog, for instance. Other things that are interesting is, and I've already mentioned, getting your IP in, pulling your IP from, who you've got the rights from to do something. If you're wanting to make a James Bond game, are you actually able to do that? Is James Bond in the public domain yet? I don't think so. So you need to go to, I'm not even sure who has it, I think it's MGM, and make sure that they actually give you the license so that you can make your fantastic 007 Goldfinger remake. One of the most fascinating aspects for me about licensing in is image rights. So if you're wanting to make a game where you are, let's say you're making the next FIFA and you're wanting to put your favorite soccer player in there, and you're actually using his likeness, that's problematic because those image rights exist for that particular player. And in order to use their likeness and use their name, you may well need to contact them depending on the IP law that applies to them. In terms of publishers, really the most interesting thing for me is the publisher's obligations and how they actually engage in that alongside their license to do that. Because the publisher doesn't just have the right to disseminate everything. They have to get that right from the person who owns it originally, being the developer. So carving that out, carving those specifics out, what you can do, what you can't do with IP, is very important in that particular contract. Marketers, the only real thing that I find that we have time to chat about at the moment is this concept of influencers, because I use the term streamers quite broadly, but streamers can include influencers. Essentially any point where you hold up your phone, take a video of yourself and say, hi, I'm Kevin, I really like this particular product, I like this particular game, why don't you play it? Or watch me play this game. The reason I'm bringing these two together is that there is a bit of a connection between these two. You can be an influencer for your own account. You can be streaming something just because you like doing it and building a brand that you can then sell to other people in some particular way. But you may also be streaming on behalf of the actual developer themselves. So they've actually approached you because you have market reach, and they're wanting you to try and market their product. So that shifts you a little bit further away from you being a consumer and more into you actually being part of their marketing strategy. And that particular contract would also be very important because your rights are then a little bit more. Your obligations are also a little bit more in terms of what you have to do then. From a consumer side, one of the things that I mean, there are a lot of sort of legal stories that I'd love to be able to talk about, but developers and publishers and distributors, they would need to obviously be aware of the licenses that they give to their clients through their subscription models, or sorry, rather their licenses. So the perpetual license is a subscription license. And one of the biggest things that, I mean, everyone should know about already is this concept of fan creations. If you give people a license to play your game and they then use that game to make something else, who owns that something else? This was a big thing that caused Dota 2 to happen. Well, Dota to happen in the first place, and evolve. And I'm out of time, but the last things that I really want to touch on are, like I mentioned before, as an esports team, what are your employment responsibilities? Are your players actually under South African law regarded as employees? Personally, from what I've researched, I believe that they are. And how do you, in your agreements with your players, deal with what your obligations are as the club, as the team itself, getting opportunities for your players and bringing them to tournaments, wrestling that side of the business? And then obviously you must bear in mind your relationship with your supporters. If you have a massive fan club, there's a particular service that you're providing them as well. People can register on your website, data that you would need to be protecting, connecting you to a regulator there. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to mention is going back to the concept of image rights. In the same way that a developer might want to make a video game about a soccer player, and they would need to use image rights there, that's because your face, your persona, is a right that you have ownership of, and how it's used, you have ownership of. As an esports player, you have that as well. So if you are the most famous player in Team Liquid, and now you move to somewhere else, or they're wanting to use your face because they know that all of the fans are going to be watching them because Jesse is now playing Dota 2. Shucks, I want to go and see Jesse. Jesse's face has power and is on par, really, with the power that Team Liquid has. I'm just using that as an example. I know, Jesse, I don't know if you are ever wanting to get involved with actual playing that.
Kevin,
okay. I have a very good and strongly developed habit of talking more than I should, and I'm 2 minutes over my allocated amount, so I will stop and I will hand over to Jesse and beg for your forgiveness.
No, cool, Kevin, it's fine. No, you actually gave us a really great picture into, you know, what the current industry looks like, with all the different various role players. I think maybe just wanted to add something before we move on to our colleagues Jason and Bronwyn to talk about their sections of the webinar. The concept of branding and image in a video game context is so important, purely because, you know, I think of how Ninja moved over from one streaming platform to the other and literally set off a chain of events that made that that led to so many other creators then moving to that same platform. When it moved from Twitch to Mixer, and then when he moved back, when he moved back to Twitch, it put a whole different spotlight on Twitch. And you will see these things happening more frequently, where these big platforms like YouTube and Twitch go out and they offer these streamers very big contracts because their face has value, their branding has value to them. And it's pretty interesting because a couple of years ago, you would never have thought that someone sitting behind a desk playing video games, some either making a fool of themselves or either really just showing people that they're very good at playing a particular game, would be in these positions to make so much money. I like to always think about, and I mean, Kevin, the reference you made around Dota 2 was particularly important, because from Dota 2 we got another game called League of Legends, and League of Legends tournaments ended up creating prize pools of over millions of dollars for their players. We essentially entered into a period of time where becoming an esports player was and still is a viable option in certain countries. But I digress just a little bit. So our colleagues Bronwyn and Jason have just joined us. So I'm going to hand over to Bronwyn quickly to talk about the social media law aspects relating to video games, and then we're going to jump to Jason on the data protection law aspects. So Bronwyn, take it away.
Thanks very much, Jesse, and hello to all our attendees today. Quite excited to be on today's webinar and had quite a lot of fun sort of reading up on gaming law and how social media legal issues sort of relate to it. And I think I want to start off with an important concept relating to at least Michalsons' perspective of social media. So from our perspective, the definition of social media is where one person is able to communicate on a platform to multiple people. So that's a very broad definition and sort of encompasses more platforms than I think people originally anticipate. So, if I say social media, my first thought is Facebook, without a doubt. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those are the traditional platforms when you think social media. But with the definition that I've just given you, it includes a WhatsApp group, one to many, even email. I can send a single email to many people. So the issues that present itself in all those various aspects can present itself in social media. So, sending the message to the wrong person via email can equally happen on social media platforms. Maybe you accept the wrong person's friend request. Maybe someone masquerades as somebody else, and now you're engaging with somebody, and things change there. So that's sort of how we look at social media. And you might already be thinking that most online gaming platforms allow me as an individual to communicate with many people. Gone are the days of, games with discs, being offline. I remember the PlayStation 1 with the cassette that you sort of jammed into the top, and you'd play with the controller. Many Mario games were played on that with my siblings. It was great fun, but that was in person, two people sitting side by side. But nowadays everything is online. Even Sims, you're going to purchase that on Steam, or an online gaming platform, which is another element to a social media view of gaming, because Steam has chat functionality, and you can communicate with your friends online, you can connect to people. And so again, the issues that present itself in social media can equally present itself there as well. So with that context in mind, I'd like to look at sort of two examples. So I think
I think we just lost Bronwyn. I think load shedding has just been wreaking havoc on everyone's internet connections today. We'll just give her a moment to come back.
You should have some elevator music playing.
Didn't think that.
Telcom hold music.
Bronwyn's back. Great.
Sorry about that, everybody. I'm not entirely sure what happened just there, but I trust you can all see and hear me. Fantastic. Right, so to get into the two examples I wanted to discuss, as I mentioned, defamation is something that we've seen on social media, and it presents itself in gaming. And recently, Twitch faced this challenge with two users. It was towards the end of last year, which I feel like the timing under COVID times, you never really know when these things are happening, but it was towards the end of 2021, which last I checked was last year. And there were two users on Twitch that were effectively conducting hate raids. I don't know if any of the attendees on the call were maybe experienced these or saw the news around them, but they were conducting hate raids, which is effectively, posting hate speech and messages in chats, and they were basically targeting certain marginalized streamers. They also created bots to sort of generate this hate speech faster, and they were also avoiding Twitch's attempts to remove them from the platform. So quite a few of the platforms have mechanisms in place now to prevent this from happening. I think also, platforms have, or games rather, have means of preventing cheating, but people are circumnavigating this regardless. The same now with these hate raids. Unfortunately, these two users were, spamming people, and Twitch was really struggling to the point that they initially they didn't take action, but then when users on Twitch decided to boycott Twitch for a day, well, then suddenly, Twitch sat up and took attention, and they actually sued these two users for their conduct on the platform. So from a social media perspective, we've often seen, pressure for the likes of Twitter and Facebook to regulate what is being posted on their sites. So fake news is a big one. We've seen that. And it'll be interesting to see how, from a gaming perspective, how platforms are expected to regulate where users are, being abusive and not behaving in an appropriate manner. And it's tricky because the law might not require it, right? So the law might not put responsibility on Twitch to, control what its users are doing. But with this case, it's clear and interesting to see that, the other users basically enforce Twitch to take this action. it was quite interesting to see that Twitch is actually a subsidiary of Amazon. I myself don't use Twitch too much, but I was quite interested to see that. So naturally, Amazon has some big guns behind it. So taking on those 2 users in court was probably the right approach to take. I'm not sure at this stage how that case is going and where it's going to end up, but it's a good example of how, you know, legal issues that you see in a social media context, or should I say a traditionally social media context, come into play in a gaming platform. And then I'm aware that I'm close on time, but I've just got one more example, which I think is quite a fun one, and it relates to conducting criminal activity on social media platforms. So I think this is something that we're aware of. You know, criminals use social media to communicate. You can put something out there publicly, and people might not realize that you're sending a certain type of message. And I recently watched a series on Netflix. It's originally a Norwegian series called Occupied, and effectively Norway is invaded and occupied by Russia, incidentally. And the individuals and the characters in the series, they use a game, DayZ, and I'm not familiar with the game, so I had to check if it's a real game, and it is. And they use this game to basically strategize their war efforts, because there's the perception that, you know, they're not resisting the occupation and that they're just cooperating, but in reality they're sitting in their rooms playing computer games, but they're not. They're strategizing and planning their operations within Norway. So I thought that was a very interesting sort of scenario. Naturally, it is fiction, so please don't go quoting me on that in real life circumstances. That's not to my knowledge what's happening currently. But in this scenario, it was interesting to see how gaming can be used for alternative purposes. But Jason, you're perfectly timed, and I believe it's now your segment. JC, maybe to introduce.
Cool, yeah. So Jason's going to be chatting a little bit about the data protection issues that that people within the video game industry and just, you know, video game law in general may face, what may arise. Little interesting tidbit about most of us on this phone call. We are all gamers. We've all played some type of game in any stretch, manner, or form. Myself and Jason are both very big fans of PlayStation, whereas I think Bronwyn and Kevin are more part of the master race and they prefer playing on PCs. And our facilitator, Jamal, she has more involvement in terms of trying to get kids off of their tablets at a certain point in time, because we'd always know that kids are just stuck to their electronic devices all the time. Jason, do you want to take it away?
Great, thank you very much, Jesse. And yeah, good morning to everyone. So yeah, what Jesse's just mentioned is I'll be briefly discussing, you know, how data protection law applies to the gaming industry. So this is whether you are a gaming business, so you develop games, you sell games, or you're just a gamer. So yeah, let's just jump straight into this. So basically, to start, if you're a gaming business, so you develop games and sell games, if you're processing personal information of gamers, data protection law does apply to you. So a couple of years ago, this probably wasn't the first thing on your list to deal with when starting a game or developing a game and then selling it on. But now, more recently, you know, data protection law is becoming a fact of life. It's now within many jurisdictions around the world. You know, we've got the GDPR, we've got Papaya in South Africa, and it means you have to comply with it. If you're collecting sign-up information of your gamers, you unfortunately are processing personal information, and you know, either GDPR or Papaya, depending on where you are, does apply to you. So what is the risk of non-compliance? Let's look at that first. So there's risk to both you, the gaming business, and there's also risk to the data subject or the gamer. From the gaming business perspective, if you fail to comply with the data protection law that does apply to you, you risk facing fines from the relevant data protection authority or regulator, or you also could be suffering consequences of reputational damage, which is potentially more damaging than the fine would be. You know, if the fine is $5 million or whatever, and you're a massive company, you can probably absorb that. But can you suffer the loss of trust and all the gamers getting involved on Reddit and in the forums and everything, and you know, destroying your business's reputation through those channels? I don't know if you can. So just to give an example, Sony last year suffered a data breach of, I think it was 77 million of their customers' login details were accessed by unauthorized people. And what this means is those details are now open to other people having access to them. So from a gamer's perspective, your information is now out there in the public domain. Do you want that? Probably not. You want to safeguard the information that you've given to Sony and trusted them to safekeep it. This is information that could be, as minimal as your name. That might not be that damaging to be out in the public domain, but it could be credit card information. It could be your home address. It could be details of your children if you've got paid accounts, things like that. Which is actually another thing to keep in mind is a large portion of the gaming community are people under the age of 18. So these are minors. A lot of the gamers out there are children. So you'll be processing children's personal information. The next example is Minecraft. They suffered a data breach, I think it was in 2016, where a couple million of their users also, their accounts were hacked and their information was out there in the public domain. Now, this is not the same example where it's personal information going out to the public domain, but it's actually could create a loss of economic spending of the gamer. So Minecraft, there's elements within it that you can purchase items and things like that. And people, gamers know people love Minecraft. People invest a lot of money into Minecraft. Same would be for Fortnite. If your Fortnite account got hacked and you lost everything that you've ever bought, you're not going to be too impressed. That could be a couple of $1,000s. It could be, a couple $100 or even $10. But, losing access to that account could be financially, damaging to you as a gamer. So briefly, let's just touch on the principles that would apply to you if data protection law does apply to you. So first things first, are you processing personal information? I think if you're collecting any sort of personal information from your gamers or from your customers, data protection law does apply to you. What this means is you have to apply the principles of data protection law in your business. This means you need to be transparent. That means essentially having all your customer-facing documentation in place. You're letting people know that you are processing the personal information. You're letting people know the purposes for the processing, things like that. You need to make sure you're just notifying people that you are processing the personal information. The data minimization principle is also a very key principle that you need to apply in your business. What this means is, I'll actually just give an example. At the data collection stage, so say you need information for sign up to play your service or play your game, you need their name, you need their phone number, you might need the date of birth, depending on if it's an age-restricted game or not. But chances are you probably won't need their home address, and chances are you probably won't need their ID number. So it means don't collect that information. If you don't need it, don't collect it. That's the data minimization principle. Just collect what is absolutely necessary for you to achieve the purpose. So if the purpose is signing someone up, collect it. That's it. That's all you need. So yeah, just be sure to collect as little information as possible, and you should be set. The next is information security. So that's very important. These are employing security measures to protect information as far as reasonably practicable, like as best as you can apply given your certain circumstances. So only go as far as you need to go to protect the information. And I mean, if you don't put those methods in place, Sony had a data breach, Minecraft had a data breach. I think Twitch recently had a data breach, which Jesse and I spoke about a little bit earlier. These are big companies employing big security safeguards and spending a lot of money on these safeguards, and they're suffering data breaches as well. So just make sure that you've put the best means in place as you possibly can. And if, for example, you actually have a data breach, you want to make sure that you've got a good breach notification procedure in place. So you suffer data breach, you want to be the first people to contact your customers and contact the gamers that are affected. You don't want this to be in the public domain before you've had a chance to communicate with them. So just keep things like that in mind. So process as little as possible, let people know that you're processing, and make sure that you're protecting the data as much as possible. Yeah, so those are really the key points that I wanted to touch on. I don't know, Jesse, if you want to quickly just touch on the Twitch breach briefly. But otherwise, yeah, that's
cool. So yeah, Jason. So just brief in summary, what happened was hackers managed to get access to information related to Twitch's top streamers to their top earnings, and you know, it was a lot of great content for the actual streamers themselves who could sit and react to it, but for a lot of those people, they were very much they had their personal information leaked. And you know, when you're working from, for example, from the United States, where there aren't many recognized data protection laws available, there weren't really much actions to take. But if you think about something like that happening down here, there would be more measures that a data subject could take against a company like that to ensure that their information is still protected. Cool. Thanks, Jason. That was really great. And I see that we are a little bit pressed for time, but what I will do is I'm going to get to the one that probably a lot of people are actually here for, which is the Film and Publications Amendment Act. Now, when Kevin and I first saw that, the very first thought that I had was Hikomedun, which, you know, here comes a thing, essentially. And it's been something that, and even the Film and Publications Board have admitted it, it's something that's been coming on for a while. And they had a briefing last week Friday to try to explain, you know, what this means for members of the public. And they raised a lot of interesting points on, you know, how they're going to proceed to deal with this. And they even recognized the fact that at one point in time, the reputation was that they were a censorship body. And, you know, the idea behind the act is to bring the law up to speed with this massive influx of the digital economy and you know, all this information being put out there, because previously, you know, when you had normal print media, it was very easy to regulate what content went out. Nowadays, you can literally just switch on your smartphone and then you can get whatever information depending on, you know, what Google wants you to see or what Facebook wants you to see. And, you know, a lot of people, when they saw this act, and I mean, even us, we were a little bit nervous about, you know, what does this mean? Because effectively the Film and Publications Amendment Act gives them a lot of powers over regulating online content. And they make this distinction between, you know, a commercial online distributor and a non-commercial online distributor. And, you know, with very little guidance on what that actually meant, people, and I mean, even a lot of us were thinking, well, does that mean that if I need to post a tweet on Twitter, do I need to get my content do I need to do a pre-classification publication? And the answer is, based on what the Film and Publications Board said, no, you don't. The only time that the Film and Publications Board is going to worry about what you're posting on the internet is when any of that content that you're putting on social media falls into any of that, what they consider to be prohibited content in terms of the act. So incitement to commit violence, hate speech. There was another one that's propaganda to start war. It's that category of information that they're really looking at, and even more so. And I know, Kevin, you and I had a discussion about this previously. You know, the Film and Publications Board is saying, cool, you know, we're not going to go after these people, but the act doesn't necessarily say that. So there's a lot of work that they need to do to regain that public confidence, because at the moment, you know, a lot of things are very up in the air. The other thing that they mentioned was around, you know, commercial online distribution. So I know that there's some streamers on this call, and you know, it was very interesting during the briefing because they tried to use the definitions to explain this, and I think at part they did a little bit of a good job because it allayed some of the fears, but at the same time, it still left a lot to it still left us with a lot of questions in our head. So, for example, they mentioned that they will be engaging with these large distributors like your YouTube, like your Twitch, like your Facebook, like your Twitter, to enter into online distribution agreements, which is supposed to streamline and make that content classification a lot easier for them. Whether or not this is already being done, or whether or not, you know, there's already a list out, we can't say for certain. But I do imagine that the Film and Publications Board are going to they're going to explain themselves a little bit more. They're going to hold more public briefings so that the general public can be or feel a little bit more at ease about what the provisions of the Act mean for them. But now, obviously, if you're neither party to a commercial online distribution agreement, and you're publishing something like video games, you're publishing something like films, you would generally more than likely and probably will have to register as a commercial online distributor. And that process is something that they need to flesh out more, and they need to give those that are dealing with it a lot more information about response times and what exactly they need to do and what they need to pay. But the nice thing about it, and what they mentioned in the briefing, is that these things are scaled according to the size. So you're not going to be paying, if you're a small distributor of video games in South Africa, they're not going to expect you to pay what Netflix would need to pay to register as an online distributor. And I think that it is very interesting. We will have an alert coming out about this very soon, but it's very interesting to see that that is the position that they've taken. Once again, and I think I'm going to echo one of Kevin's comments here. We have to see what they're going to do, because they can say all these things, but if it's not written in law, we don't know what or how they're going to proceed with this.
Yeah, Jesse, if I just add a little bit of stuff. Thanks. So we've written a little bit about what the Film Publications Amendment Bill, now Act, does. And what some of our problems are with it, and you can read about that on our website. And I mean, it's no secret my disdain for the Film Publications Board. So I echo what Jesse has said, that I don't trust what they say. I trust what's in the law, because the reality is, what the law says is that if you earn any money, if you're a commercial online distributor, which they don't really define very well, but they say if you earn any money from what you do, you need to register, which doesn't make sense to me. If you are going to be a streamer, you still need to classify the content that you're streaming. So your actual stream would need to be classified, which also doesn't really make sense to me. How is it? I won't say that it's impossible, but it's extremely difficult for you to, as a streamer, go, right, my stream is going to be catering to 13-year-olds. So I have to make 100% sure that I don't swear. I will use maybe these kinds of words or this kind of language. And if anything happens on my stream that pushes me past that, I'm liable. Now, what does that cover? Does that cover people in your chat as well? If they get hate rated, like if you get hate rated, like Bronwyn was saying, does that now push you out of a PG-13 into an R18 classification? I don't know, and it's not clear, and it's very, very, very worrying. One of the other things, there are a lot of things that I can talk about here, but we don't have the time for it, and I don't have the emotional energy for it. But one of the most troubling things for me is that when it comes to actual classification, let's say we've forgotten the whole distribution, registering as a distributor thing, and we're just looking at classifying games. You're not a streamer, you're not anything, you're just creating games and you're wanting to classify it. If you create a game for kids, a game for my 1-year-old, that has to be classified. And there is no all ages classification. The lowest classification that you can get is PG, which means that any person under the age of 18 has to be supervised by an adult while playing their game. So if Jesse's younger siblings are sitting playing Fortnite one day, they can legally only be doing it with Jesse in the room watching them, which is a little bit silly. That's pretty much all I wanted to raise.
Okay, then that's you made some great points there. And just on the point, if my younger siblings were playing Fortnite, I'd probably be playing with them. I'm not even gonna lie. So there will be some type of parental guidance there. But yeah, so there's still a lot of work to be done on the, from the Film and Publications Board to explain and to emphasize, how these things are going to work in practice. The other thing I did want to mention is that they're hopefully going to be coming out with amended regulations, and that will hopefully, clarify a lot of these issues going forward. So I think before we get into any of the question and answer sessions, we've we've given you a lot of content, and there's not much time left. But there's one more poll that I'd want to share with you, is really just, how can we help you? And this poll lists certain areas that we feel are quite important, or we feel that would have high impacts on your on the different organizations dealing with video games and digital entertainment law in general. And we believe that coming out of this, we would want to tailor a lot of this information for you and make it relevant for you, so that you understand, or when you want to come to us with an issue, you'll be able to tell us, cool, this is what I'm looking for. I need help with regulatory advice because I need to know how the Film and Publications Amendment Act affects my organization. Cool. We would be able to help you there. Or alternatively, you're thinking about hiring developers to develop content for you. We would be able to assist you with that by putting the contracts in place. So if you have an intellectual property question, those are the kinds of things we would be able to help you with. Just going to give it a few minutes. So we're kind of over time, so we're probably going to take 1 or 2 questions if we can. We will do our best to answer the questions as well as we can, particularly if there may or may not be a question that might be too loaded and we would need to take offline chat with you. So if you need any assistance, please contact our support desk, and they will assist you with allocating you with the necessary attorney that will be able to help you. I do just want to say that this was a very great session. I was very thankful to have the session. Kevin and I are both very passionate about the subject area, and we're really looking forward to figuring out ways that we can potentially help people within the industry. I'm just going to quickly end the poll and share the results. Generally, we see that the spread is more around legal opinions and regulatory advice. Those are the ones that we anticipated, because there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty on what the Film and Publications Amendment Act, for example, will mean for certain people, and IP and trademark, intellectual property law type issues are constantly creeping up, whether it's creating modifications in games or whether it's just creating your own game from scratch. Cool. So do we have any questions?
Jesse, there was just one question that came in on the dot at 11 o'clock. If I'm developing and publishing online training material for courses being paid for, do I need to register? And if so,
Kevin, I don't know if you want to jump on this question.
So really, we'd have to find out more about the types of training material. I'm assuming that the training material is written. If it is video, then I don't know, honestly. The Film and Publications Board it would be unclear. Like Jesse mentioned, the one thing that they're wanting to do is build relationships with the online distributors themselves. So if you are creating something and getting paid by YouTube, then you might not necessarily have to get appointed or registered as an online distributor, but the platform that you're on would have to as well. Now that raises the interesting question of, what if it's not a platform like YouTube, but another platform? What if it's a separate platform, like you're doing something for your work, you're doing something for a school, they have a particular website that they're doing, and you're disseminating video newsletters or updates or things like that. You're doing training for a particular, all the training providers that I knew have just come out of my head completely. Get Smarter, right? You're doing training for Get Smarter. Do you, as the training provider, have to sign up? Does Get Smarter have to sign up? What if Get Smarter doesn't want to sign up? Where does that put you? What risk do you have in a situation like that? These are all things that we don't know yet. So it would require a little bit more depth of investigation, unfortunately.
Cool, thanks, Kevin, and I hope that's provided at least some clarity on your question. Do we have any other questions?
no questions. Hold on.
Cool. So then I think that we can end the webinar. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you guys today. I hope you guys had a lot of fun just learning more about the video game industry and digital entertainment in general. And we hope to do more of these in the future.
Yeah, it was great having you guys here. Thank you very much, Jesse, for hosting, and everyone for participating. And yeah, we look forward to chatting to you again about all of the other stuff that we have said outside here, and all of the other things that you're interested in. Please let us know, and we will definitely get back to you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day further, and may the force be with you.
And also with you.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.